Good evening, everyone. I'm your host, Raj Singh, and you are watching the weekly podcast and Walking Tribune. And I have my co-host along with me.
Good day, Jatwal.
Thank you, Gutej, for being with me this evening, and thank you so much to our guest for tonight. He's the Michigan Representative Ranjiv Puri, who is the 21st District Representative from state of Michigan. Thank you so much for being with us tonight.
Rajdeep and Gurtej, thank you so much for having me. I love watching your show whenever I get a chance. I think you guys are doing a great job, so it's an honor to be here.
Well, thank you very much. And Gurtej, please let's get started and let's see what we can learn from our representative. And he is probably one of the youngest community member who is at the representing us at the state level. So let's have some conversation.
Yeah, no, thank you very much, Ranjiv. First, we would like to know more about you, your personal, your professional journey, your educational journey, and why you chose to be in this policymaking field.
Thank you. Yes. So just starting to Sat Sri Akal. Again, thank you for having me. Again, my name is Ranjiv Puri. So my parents came to this country from Punjab in the early 70s. And as many people know, when you're immigrating in that period, you really couldn't pick where you're going. It was more of a lottery where you ended up, and they ended up in Racine, Wisconsin, of all places. And so I was born there many years later, but in that period when they came here, as many immigrants from that time, there was not a very robust or large community, especially in rural Wisconsin. And so, I watched firsthand as they kind of helped build and start that community over time as more and more people came. And I think like every first or second generation immigrant, I think I struggled with that dichotomy of holding on to those cultural roots that my parents brought from India while also assimilating to kind of our new life here in the Midwest. And so those very much shaped who I was. I watched again firsthand as my parents worked very hard and helped start that community and just having the ideals of community first. And that led me to get started working with President Obama. So in 2008, I was in Chicago and I got a chance to work on his presidential campaign, which absolutely transformed the way that I thought and was very, very motivating for me. Got a chance to continue on in 2012 for his re-election campaign, and again, just absolutely opened my eyes to just so much that I wanted to fight and that I was passionate about. And the reason I brought all this up is because if you guys remember, in 2012 is when unfortunately there was the shooting in Oak Creek, Wisconsin, and so my parents had moved away from Wisconsin by then, but we still had many close family and friends. And so we got news, I drove straight up to Wisconsin, and that was, every candidate kind of has a seminal moment of when they realize that, hey, you know what, I need to run for office or I need to do something. And for me, that, quite frankly, that was that moment. I watched as, the Gurdwara there was attacked by a white supremacist, thinking, in the name of Islamophobia, xenophobia, coming in and killing 6 innocent souls. And what hurt was just seeing how our community really didn't have a platform, where this was in the news for just a few short hours, because I think afterwards there was a shooting in another part of the country that kind of captivated the media outlet. And I watched as my family's story, my parents' immigrant story, was only worth just a couple minutes on CNN, and after that it kind of disappeared. And I realized that I wanted to use my platform to fight for something more, and so finished up my MBA, moved back to Michigan with my wife, got started professionally in the automotive industry, but really started paying attention to what's happening, started helping candidates getting involved, and and there's a saying in politics that you don't find an office, it finds you, and so after a couple years of just doing a lot of organizing here, an opportunity opened up to run for state representative here in Michigan, and so had a hard-fought campaign in 2020, and fortunately we're on the right side, and the rest is history.
Yeah, no, thank you very much, Representative Ranjiv. As you mentioned, everybody has a triggering point So like in 2011 in El Grove, Sacramento, there was a similar mishap where two turban-wearing Sikhs, they were killed, and the mystery is still, or the culprit is still unsolved. Then it happened in 2012 in Wisconsin Oak Creek. Then 2 years ago, it happened in Tracy, California. A elderly man, he was doing an evening walk in a park. He was stabbed to death. So these incidents are happening across United States. So one thing I can say is the minority community, they are not heard, or there's an issue of inclusion, equality. So how do you think this challenge of inclusion, equality can be dealt, and what value can be added from a representative perspective or the perspective of a common citizen?
Well, I think you broke up there a little bit at the end, but if I heard the question correctly, I think these values of equality are very fundamental in the tenets of Sikhism, of our culture, of standing up for all of humanity, right? And always fighting for what's right. And so, as you mentioned, unfortunately, the Punjabi Sikh community has a long history of facing hate and discrimination in this country. Just a few weeks ago, we saw another incident happen in Indianapolis, which I'm sure you're unfortunately familiar with as well. And what I tell people is that hate has no bounds. Okay, as a community, one thing that I think is very important is that we're a very insular community overall, but we need to understand that the same people that work against Black Lives Matter movement, the same people that are against immigration reform, are the same people that spew this hate in the Gurdwaras, that spew shootings like Indianapolis, or even broader Asian hate crimes like we saw in Georgia just a few weeks before Indianapolis. And so we need to denounce hate in all its forms and to understand that we're all different, and that's what makes us beautiful. And we need to come together and find that its strength in that, and tackle hate in that sense. But systemic bias and racism exist on so many levels in this country. And as I mentioned, it's one of those things when you start peeling back an onion and you see 20 other layers. And so there's a lot of work to be done systemically. But I think our community, but the fight against this is a fundamental tenet of our community in which we are built to stand up and fight against this. And so I think that that's a very important way for us to kind of visualize and handle this.
Oh, great. Thank you. Thank you for sharing your thoughts and perspective on that. And like you mentioned, a couple of things I'm going to point out. One, you are a son of immigrant parents, and they moved back in 1970, which is very hard at that time. I believe a lot of folks didn't even know what to do, where to start at that point. And thanks to your parents then who gave you such a great life here as well. And you went to a good schooling here and worked, earned your a degree in business and worked for the business industry as well at such a young age. If I'm right, you are now probably you are below 40 years right now, anywhere between 35 and 40. And at this young age, you said you started working for Obama's campaign back in 2012 or 2013, those years. You got involved. That was such a young age that anybody can think of that I wanted to get into this, and these are the things that matter to me. Because I don't remember when I was 22, 23, I wanted to party. I wanted to go hang out with my friends, and I probably didn't even think about this until probably 4 or 5 years ago. And that is very, very unique and trusting, and salute to you for that you have that kind of upbringing, the giving back to the community, and it probably runs in our blood. And so I want to touch on that. What made you decide to get into the political arena? I don't want to call it political arena, more onto the things that matter for our society, the things that matter for our nationwide, for our among us, like working for Obama's campaign and organizing other events. That's what gets you involved. That's probably give you the more exposure. What are the challenges and problems that we are facing in our society? And you decided that, hey, this is something you, like you said, in politics, the office finds you. It's not you know where to go. So something touch on that with us, please.
Yeah, no, thank you for the question, Rajdeep. I think from an early age, I was always just a little bit different in the sense where I was the first person in my family born in this country. My older brother was born in Amritsar and came with my parents. And I just always been different in weird ways. You know, I'm the only left-handed person in my family. But from an early age, I think just intrinsically being born, as you mentioned, being born in this country, I felt a sense of privilege, and I wore that, you know, with a tremendous amount of pride. You know, not to say that I equally wasn't as proud of my roots as well. I absolutely am to this day. But you know, I always had a sense of pride and privilege of growing up in this country. And like I said, you know, I think it was just a matter of many different pieces falling into place. Again, kind of watching my parents' story unfold firsthand and watching them be very involved in their community, and setting that up just, you know, kind of instilled me with those values. I didn't always plan on doing this. That wasn't the plan from the start. I think, you know, I think one thing I've learned is you need to follow your passion, and you need to follow your dreams to do this authentically. It's this field of work, and this is a tremendous sacrifice. It's a lot of work, and so if you're not doing this for the right reasons, it's either going to be exposed very early, or you're going to be extremely unhappy. And so I just think it's very important that everyone kind of finds what they're passionate about, what they want to fight for, and then kind of find a way to channel that advocacy. And so, you know, as you mentioned, our community can make some headway in this space. You know, I applaud both of you for having this weekly show. Advocacy can mean so many different things. It doesn't necessarily mean running for office. It doesn't necessarily mean having a weekly podcast. It can mean a million different things. And so, you know, what I'm trying to say is, you know, it's important for everyone to kind of do their due diligence and figure out what they think is the best use, you know, of their goals and their desires and their time and their energy, and then obviously to chase those dreams. But you know, and so for me personally speaking, like I said, I didn't think I'd always wanted to do this. I got an MBA. I was going down the corporate path, but I never had that fulfillment, like I was making a difference, until I started kind of getting a little bit more involved in my local community and fighting for these values, and seeing how underrepresented our community was. You know, whether that's our Punjabi community, whether it's our Desi community, whether it's our Asian community, whether it's, you know, just our minority community, just we're underrepresented on so many different levels. And it never sat right with me. And as I got more involved, I continued to find more and more ways to use my voice, ultimately leading to the opportunity to run for office. And you know, and that fortunately worked out for us. But it wasn't like a flip of the switch. I knew that this was going to happen. I think this was something that was built over many years.
Great. Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah, no, Representative, as you mentioned about the education in 70s, your parents came, so they had a vision to provide education. I was reading, so in Stockton, the first Sikh temple that was established in 1908, they established some scholarships in UC Berkeley. That scholarship was for all the communities. Our community that is very visionary, they are pro-education. But now majority people, they are into small businesses, they are into the logistic or the trucking industry. Their kids, they are a little bit deviating from education. As automation is coming, internet is booming, or the e-commerce, like big companies like Amazon. So eventually in 10-15 years, small business will get disrupted. If this automation vehicles or the trucking industry, automation trucks will come, trucking industry will get disrupted. So what is your focus on education? How do you see that there is a need for especially minority communities or everyone in the society to get a good education so that we can continue to improve?
Yeah, Gurdwara, I think that's a very important question, and you're extremely accurate. You know, my parents, like many immigrants of that time, came to this country for more opportunities for their future kids. I wasn't even born, and they're already thinking about their future kids, and for the sole reason of education. And so, you know, and like I said, I take that privilege of being able to be born and brought up here with a tremendous amount of pride. And I know that, you know, education was such a key tenet of just the social mobility that my parents and my family were able to experience. And so I'm a strong proponent of education. And like you said, there's a tremendous amount of disruption happening. Speaking to on the automation side of it, I am coming from the automotive industry. Here in Michigan, there's about a 50% chance you work in automotive as it is. And so, the electric cars, self-driving cars, all of that is going to be extremely relevant. And, in any industry that, and almost every industry is going to be impacted in some way. And so, you don't want to bet against technology because it's not really a matter of if, it's a matter of when you're going to lose, because at some point the technology will prevail. And so it's extremely important that we are on the front end of this innovation, and we are doing what we can to prepare for this change, so our change is not reactionary, that we know exactly where things are headed, and that we are finding ways to evolve our small businesses to continue to be relevant. Because if we don't change, unfortunately, the future, the long-term future is probably not going to be so bright. But if you can anticipate what is happening and react in a preventive way and prepare and encourage people to go out and get additional training, encourage people to go out into fields that we know are going to be growing in future years, then we're going to be on the right side of this change, and then we can ride that momentum to better and more efficient careers, rather than again refusing to being changed and unfortunately maybe becoming victim of some of that change in technology that is coming.
So another point in that, representative, is like brain drain. So this is the keyword that we hear in developing countries. But here as well, we are hearing this word, and this is impacting. Like whoever grew up in a city, grew up at a location, they always can add more value if there are opportunities or if that talent is retained there. But that's not happening. So the companies are not there, or the infrastructure is not there. So if I'm getting education from Central Valley, for job opportunities, I have to move out. So is there anything that you are facing around you, and what kinds of options or what kinds of thoughts you think can be done to retain that talent?
Well, this is a very relevant conversation for us in Michigan here. We have in the years past, we've had a dire problem of especially young students kind of graduating and then moving on to different cities or different states, outside of Michigan. And so the brain drain problem, I think, affects a lot of different localities, a lot of different industries, and maybe in different ways. But like you're saying, it's extremely relevant. I mean, you need to be able to retain talent, to attract new talent. And so, one thing that we're doing here locally is, as we mentioned, this technology is coming in terms of the change that's going to be happening to the transportation and automotive industry, with automation of self-driving cars, electric vehicles, the mobility movement. And so we, right now in Michigan, are the epicenter of American manufacturing and combustible engines, right? We have a strong network here of gas-powered cars. And so the change is not easy here. But like I said, like we were talking about earlier, we must adapt and we must realize what is happening, because you can kind of sit around with your hands in your pockets and refuse to change, but you're going to get left in the dark. And so there's a lot of different factors. I think my answer probably 2 years ago would have been different, but I think COVID has kind of changed the way we think, and it's kind of uncertain what the future workforce is going to look like. There's a lot more companies that are more adapt to working from home arrangements and telecommuting. That wasn't the case, just 18 months ago. And so I don't know how that's going to affect the brain drain. If you're able to work in one locality and live somewhere else, is everyone going to move to rural parts of the country for low cost of living, but have the salaries of big cities? There's probably some conversations to kind of what the future of the workforce is going to look like. But I think ultimately, like I said earlier, I think the formula is a little simple in the sense where change is coming and we need to adapt to it. And and I'm a proponent of kind of being on the front end of that. And so I think it's very prudent to not hold on to dying industries, and to make sure that we are evolving to, again, to be on the right side of that change.
No, thank you. That's extremely helpful, like the way that you're looking at the things and considering them. As you said, 2 years ago, things were different. And after COVID and due to COVID, how things are changing for being in a remote area, working from home, it's changing our day-to-day life. So there's a lot to come, I think, in the coming years. We'll see how the shift is playing a role in our lives. So we can't say much on that right now. So at the end, I would wanted to get your advice or get some of your thoughts together. So you're sitting in such a great policy-making position. In order to get there, like you said, it's just not you plug in and you jump on that. There's a lot of hard work probably went behind the scenes that you have done from last few years. So what kind of advice, what kind of experience can you share for anybody who's interested to come into the policy-making positions such as yours, or it could be a local level, city council, mayor, or any other public office? So what kind of challenges you would recommend that they would be facing, or what kind of things you should recommend to them that they should be doing to get involved?
Yes, I think this is a really great question. And, you know, there's a dire need for our community to kind of open up and start getting a little bit more involved civically. And, you know, we kind of touched on this a little bit earlier today. Then there's so many different ways to get involved, right? You don't necessarily need to run for office, but if you're interested, and really my first advice to everyone is, if you're interested, like let's see this, because I've met 1,000 people who say I really want to do it, but then, you know, something gets in the way, and then they weren't able to follow that passion. And so I want to encourage anyone to get involved, because you know, representation absolutely matters. You know, and I'm proud to say that I'm the first Sikh American elected in Michigan's legislative history, but I'm also not happy to have to be in 2021 to have to be saying that. That just shows that how much progress we still need to be making. But you know, people need to get involved. You know, I know both of you are doing your bit out in Tracy, but people should start going to their local township meetings, their local board meetings, paying attention to what's happening. It's important. There's a lot of local, you know, Democratic clubs or Republican clubs. Go to your local clubs, start making a network and getting involved. You know, I think one thing that's important to realize is that once you're elected, you are representing everybody, regardless of their political beliefs, regardless of, you know, their creed or gender, race, or sexual orientation. You're representing everybody, and so it's really important for you to meet as many people as you possibly can in your local community. And so one way to do that is to start showing up at local events that are happening. Through that, you will start developing a network. You'll start seeing kind of you know, the local lay of the land, and figuring out where you think that you belong. And you know, as you mentioned, it's one thing if you want to run for local level or county level or state level or federal level. Those all have different roles and responsibilities, and you know, it's really important for people to kind of understand all the various roles that are out there, and to figure out kind of, you know, what they want to be fighting for, where their passions lie, and then start developing a path to pursue that. And so, and granted, you know, I mean, this is just my one opinion, and you know, I think what's also very important to realize is that everyone's journey is very different. Everyone's situation is very different, and so what maybe works for me may not work for someone else, and vice versa. And so it's very important also to kind of realize your own situation, and make sure you do your homework. But you know, there's a tremendous amount of resources out there. You know, we have organizations out there like SALDEF and We Are Sikhs and Sikh Coalition that have some information on kind of civic engagement, and there's other resources out there as well, and to start realizing kind of what's happening in your local community and how you can best make an impact.
Almost definitely. I think these are really, really good points that you have provided, and absolutely you're right. It's changes situation to situation and person to person. So only you can say, hey, this is the bare minimum basic things that you need to do, and test it out how it works out for you. And that's all for me, Representative Ranjit, for tonight. And Gurdwara, I want to hand it back to you if you have anything that's left and wanted to engage with.
You know, I want to thank Representative Ranjiv. Yeah, education, that is the key point. And the other thing is understanding the grassroots problems, grassroots issues, and what is close to your heart. Then you can put your 100% and move forward in that direction. And to our listeners, I would request you to please forward your questions. We will request Representative Ranjiv to get those questions answered. And please give us feedback, and we'll be back with the next weekly podcast to provide more information. Till then, stay healthy and stay informed. Thank you very much, Representative, and thank you, the audience.
Thank you so much for having me. I look forward to coming back again.